So without further ado, I'm excited today to be hosting this seminar. So today we have Lei Li, who's a W2 professor of economics at the University of Göttingen and also an IZA research affiliate. And today she will present her paper titled When Growth Stumbles, Pollute, Trade War, Environmental Enforcement, and Pollution. And as always, kind of in the seminar, we're gonna aim for about 40 minutes presentation with only clarifying questions, please, throughout. And then we'll have about 20 minutes Q&A at the end and an optional sort of informal networking session for about 10 minutes at the very end. So I'll be here to moderate and look at the chat if there's any issues, but other than that, Lei, take it away.
Thank you so much for the nice introduction, and thanks so much for having me. Maybe let me share the screen. Can you see the screen? Thank you. And the paper that I'm going to present today is about the impact of trade war on pollution in China. Politicians usually face an important trade-off between short-run economic growth and environmental protection. And under the pressure of economic downturns, government, especially local government officials, may tend to sacrifice the long-run economic development and give permission to access pollution. So why this is the case? As we know that politicians, they gonna to face the trade-off or the decision between protecting the environment and economic growth. And during economic downturns, for those local politicians whose political career is closely related to the local economic performance, and they're going to attach higher importance to make sure that the local GDP growth, the employment didn't go down that much. The US-China trade war actually provide a good quasi-natural experiment for us to test how do local politicians and firms will behave under economic downturns. And the economic question that we are exploring today is about how does political incentives affect local government officials' behaviors during the economic downturns. So here goes the story. During the US-China trade war, because of the higher US tariff, China's export to the US declined a lot. And the local, the cities in China that are more exposed to the US tariff face the risk of economic downturn. And in order to make sure that the local GDP didn't go down that quickly, and to make sure social stability and to guarantee stable employment growth, the local government officials tend to sacrifice the environment to save for the economic growth, because their future promotion is closely related to the local government's say social security, social stability, employment growth, and GDP growth. So how would a local government official make the decision? And this graph shows the idea. For the politically motivated officials, local officials, they face the trade-off between economic growth and environmental protection. And when the risk of economic downturn increase, they tend to adopt lenient environmental regulation policy. That is, they keep a blind eye for firms violating the environmental rules. And as a result, firms will generate excess pollution. And this is exactly what we find during the US-China trade war. And what we find is that by using the city level, monitor level data, we find for the cities that are more exposed to the US tariff, the local pollution or the air quality got worse during the trade war. And this also the case when we turn to firm level pollution emission data. And meanwhile, we show that China's export to the US indeed declined a lot. And why does pollution increase when the US tariff increase? And our story goes like the local government official who are politically incentivized tend to adopt a lenient environmental policy. What we find is that directly we find evidence by using the hourly data. We show that the excess pollution mainly happen at night, meaning that during daytime, the pollution emission or the air quality didn't different that much before and after the US trade war between cities that are more exposed versus less exposed to the tariff. But the difference widened at night. That means there is an excess pollution emission at night. And we interpret this phenomena as secret polluting, because if you pollute at night, most of the local residents, they already go to bed. They couldn't see the black smoke coming out of the factory. I mean, while there are less outdoor activities, so you don't smell the bad air. And also you don't see dirty water got polluted into the lakes and rivers. So it's you will get less attention in the media and will not cause so much public protest. And that's a major story. Another thing is that at night, the local government official also go back home. In order to show that this is indeed the case, we provide direct evidence. So what we do is that we're using the machine learning method and to do a textual analysis for the annual local government report. So these are the annual report, which mainly reviews the local government's plan for the next year. And what we find is that if these cities are more exposed to the US-China trade war, and these cities, local government officials are less likely to emphasize on environmental protection and pollution in their next year's plan, meaning that they are likely to adopt lenient environmental policies. And moreover, we've taken a look at the fine data. So we collect the fine data and focus on the fines for firms violating the environmental regulations. And what we find is that although the US tariff has no impact on the numbers of tickets being issued by the local government, but on average, for each ticket, the fine rate declined greatly. That means if a firm violates the environmental rules, the government is still likely to issue a ticket to punish this firm. However, the fine that you're going to pay were much smaller compared to before, meaning you have lower opportunity cost of violating the environmental rule, meaning that it becomes cheaper for firms to violate the environmental rules. And that's why they have stronger incentive to generate excess pollution. And meanwhile, we also provide a number of indirect evidence. For example, we find that firms located near the province borders, they are more likely to generate excess emission. And this is because these are the regions where the pollution generate externality to the neighboring province, which is none of the business of local government. And so that's why local government has less incentive to care. Regarding the driving force for the lenient environmental policy, we show that one of the driving force is political incentive. What we find is that if the local officials are very likely to be a native one, meaning who was born in the same province, or then they care about the long run development of this region. So that's why they are unlikely to sacrifice short-run economic growth. So they are more likely to sacrifice short-run economic downturn in the sense that they want to protect the environment. And for these cities, the US tariff has a weaker effect on pollution emission. And similarly, if the officials are close to the retirement age, they are less likely to respond to the US tariff, meaning that they're still gonna to keep a strict regulation and do not want to adopt lenient environmental policy. Another evidence, what we find is that we construct, apart from the city level tariff, we also construct industry level tariff, and we want to see which tariff had a stronger effect. if the government official only care about their political promotion, then they're gonna to compensate for every firm in their city, meaning that they not only care about the pollution emission of the cities of the firms that were affected by the US tariff, but also they will adopt lenient environmental regulation for firms that are not affected by the trade war. And this is indeed what we find, that is a city level tariff has a larger impact on industry level tariff, meaning the local government officials, their target is not to compensate firms that were negatively affected by the US tariff, but rather they want to increase or they want to make sure the city's total employment or total GDP remain relatively stable. So that's why they adopt a lenient environmental regulation for all the firms in their city rather than only the affected firms. So these are the overview of our main results. Regarding the literature, our paper is related to several strands of literature. The first one is about the impact of economic development on environment. That is a long-run effect, which is the environmental coolness curve. For this literature, the underlying driving force is change of consumer preference. That is, with the increase of income, people care more about health, about environment, rather than income. So people are more likely to sacrifice their income for a better environment. While this paper, we focus on the trade-off between short-run economic growth and environmental protection. And here we have a different driving force, different mechanism, that is political incentive. So in other words, we contribute to the literature of economic development and environment from a different angle. And this paper is also related to the literature of trade and pollution. Different from the previous literature, which focused on the production channel, this paper focused on the political incentive channel. And lastly, this paper contributes to the growing literature on the trade war, which study the impact of trade war on various outcomes, say trade flow, import price, employment, economic growth, election, stock return, and we contribute from the environmental perspective. Now let me give you a quick overview of the background. For the sake of time, I will just focus on the key takeaway message. The first thing is that the trade war is a sudden and unexpected shock for the Chinese economy. Since early 2018, US increased the tariff first on solar panel, washing machine, iron steel on a numbers of trade partners. And then from mid of 2018, the Trump government increased tariff on products produced by China. And the literature shows that this shock is quite unexpected, and it's unlikely that firm going to prepare or predict the events in advance. And also, people are not sure how long this event will last. So there's a lot of uncertainty involved. The second key message is that there are a large variation regarding the trade war. So for the US, we can see that the US mainly target on high-tech products, while for China mainly target on agriculture products. So these two countries adopt different policy, while the US care more about intellectual property right related stuff. So they mainly impose tariff on high-tech sector. And for China, the strategy is to end the trade war as soon as possible. And in order to do so, China mainly target on the products that China import from US a lot. So this is a way to hurt the US as much as possible in order to finish the trade war as soon as possible. And that is why China focuses on agriculture products and transportation related equipment. Third thing is about the environmental consequence of the trade war. And from the various newspapers and medias, we can see that there are already some anecdotal evidence showing that the Chinese local government officials tend to relax the restriction on environmental regulation when they face with a heightened risk of economic downturns. Now, so these are the three key messages regarding the background. That is, the trade war is pretty much unexpected, and there is a huge variation in terms of trade policy between these two countries. And also the already anecdotal evidence show that local government officials going to relax the environmental protection or regulation as a way to counter the heightened US tariff. And now let's come to the data and variable construction. So in this paper, we employ a rich set of data on measuring pollution. The first data set we have is a monitor hourly level data, which monitor several bunch of indicators for the air quality. And second data set is that we have firm level hourly data for major 7,600 firms. So these are the major polluting firms in China. So that's why the government will install end of pipe, and we are able to have the information, their hourly pollution information. And the second data set is regarding the US tariff and Chinese tariff. And the tariff consists of two parts. The first one is about tariff escalation. For the tariff escalation, we collect data for the Chinese part and the US part. For the China part, the data vary by 8 digits by trade partner and by date. And for US, it varies at even more granular level, that is 10-digit trade partner and date. And we also consider tariff exemption in the later waves. Apart from the tariff escalation, the second part of the data is baseline tariff, or usually we use it as a most favorable nation tariff, that is a tariff level before the trade war. The common practice of the literature is to use an annual 6-digit level most favorable nation tariff. However, what we do in this paper is that we hand collect the monthly data by HS 10 digit for China. The reason why we can't collect the data is because during the trade war, on one hand, China increased the tariff on products produced or shipped from the US. On the other hand, China lowered the preferential tariff on other trade partners as a way to offset the higher tariff on the US. And for those countries that experience kind of a preferential tariff, China import 42% of China's import were from this country. So in other words, it's really important to precisely measure the tariff adjustment during the trade war for the non-US countries. And so this is data work we have done. And then the third data is about the trade data. And these are public data from both the US and the Chinese official website. For the sample period, we focus on the period from 2017 to the end of 2019 to avoid the interference of COVID-19. Regarding the key variable construction, so here, our main variable of interest is the US tariff. And what we do is to use, based on each city's export structure, we construct the export share weighted tariff. And to be more specific regarding the share, we calculate for each product K that were exported by prefecture I to the US. We divide it with this prefecture's total export. That is, so this share vary by country and vary by product. And then we multiply by the changes of tariff between China and the US. So the variation comes from two parts. First is a difference in export structure. Second is about the tariff change. And similarly for the Chinese import tariff, based on China's import structure for each prefecture, we calculate the weighted tariff. Now let's come to our main findings. The first one is about the monitor level regression. What we do is to regress the year-on-year change of pollution in CTI and regress it on this city's US tariff exposure. If beta is positive, That means with higher US tariff, the pollution level in this city increased, meaning a worsened air quality. From these 5 columns, we learn that no matter which indicator we use, we find a consistent increase of we find a consistent impact of US tariff on air quality, meaning that if these cities are more exposed to the US tariff shock, then these cities' air quality will got worse. And here we control for the monitor fixed effect and time fixed effect. And this simple OS regression, of course, suffer from several threats to identification. The first is about pre-trend. And although we argue that the result is unlikely to be subject to the pre-trend, since the trade war is something pretty hard to be expected by firms, we still conduct the event study to test whether firms react in advance. And so what we do is to run the regression at monthly frequency. And here is what we find. That is after 6 to 8 months, the pollution levels start to increase. One may wonder why this is the case. Why didn't air pollution increase immediately? The reason is because it takes time for the local government official to take action, because at the very beginning, according to the newspapers, people thought the US-China trade dispute would end very soon, just like the trade dispute between US and Canada, US and EU, and so on and so forth. However, the trade dispute between China and US didn't end up that soon compared to the other trade dispute. And that's the reason. So why it takes several months for the local government official to realize a trade war going to be something which is long-lasting rather than a temporary thing. Because if this is just a temporary shock which lasts for 2 or 3 months, then there's no need to take reaction. And second one is about the dynamic effect. So what we do is to look at the US tariffs effect in different quarters, actually consistent with the story or the explanation I just gave. In the first quarter after the US trade war, the higher US tariff actually decreased the pollution. So why this is the case? At the very beginning, there is a huge decline in China's export to the US. So less economic activity means less pollution, and that's why the pollution level declined. And later on, when the local government official and when firms gradually realize this is gonna to be some long-lasting thing, as a way to help firm get rid of or get hurt less by the US tariff, local government officials start to take action, and we can see that gradually the US tariff is going to have a positive effect, which dominate the production channel. And third thing is about environmental inspections. So there are other events which happened during the US-China trade war, which may affect the air quality. For example, the Chinese government also have several environmental inspections. So these are the events which happened during the US-China trade war. To try to make sure that these events does not affect our main results, we control for the various environmental inspections and supervisions initiated by the Chinese government, and we find the results remain to be robust. And so there are 2 events. One is called environmental inspection. The other is blue sky event, but both events doesn't affect our main results. And alternatively, we change the specification from year-to-year change to a month-to-month change. And results are more or less still remain robust, and the coefficient remain to be positive. So the results remain robust when we change the year-to-year change, change from the year-to-year change to the month-on-month change. And also the results are robust when we try city month level pollutants. And also when we try alternative weights, say we use GDP as weights and to run a weighted regression. And also we run placebo results or drop 2017, the results remain to be robust. And next, we dive into the details. So before we focus on the city monthly frequency data, and now we would like to see the hourly change. And so what we do is we calculate the pollution change for each hour. And what we find interesting is that the excess pollution didn't happen during the daytime, but rather it happens several hours after the sunset. That is what we call secret pollution emission at night. Why this is the case, as we briefly mentioned, so actually this is anecdotal evidence about a steel mill pollution during night in Guangxi during the trade war. When there is a heightened risk, and when the local government official realize this is going to be something which is long-lasting, then they need to take action to save the local economy. In order to do so, they try to adopt linear environmental policy, and this will reduce firms' production costs because firm doesn't need to pay extra to process the wasted gas, wasted water, and wasted garbage. And this saves, reduce the production costs, and which increase the profit margin and give a firm a better edge. So in other words, here, the environmental policy serves as a kind of hidden industrial policy to help the Chinese firms affected by the trade war. And because the firms doesn't want to let the public to be aware of this, pollution at night will turn out to be a better strategy. And that's why what we find is that most of pollution happened at night. And for China, this is actually a very good setting to test this because China is a large country which covers different time zone. In other words, in different cities, the sunset time and sunrise time are very different. And so we are able to explore this geographic difference and to see whether it's driven by certain hours or it's driven by the sunset or sunrise. And what we find is indeed pollution at night. And furthermore, we calculate the difference between dark time versus daytime. And what we find is that the US tariff has a stronger effect on the daytime and nighttime pollution difference, meaning that there is a strong evidence of excess pollution at night. We also just take 2 hours, say 2 p.m., which is daytime, typical daytime, and 10 p.m., which is at night. And we see that the effect are relatively weaker at night, in the daytime, much stronger at night. Although at daytime is still positive, meaning that there's still excess pollution, but it's more prevalent at night. So now we have already showed the city level regression. Now let's come to the firm level evidence. By looking at firm level data, we get a special advantage by able to disentangle the impact of a city level tariff or industry level tariff. So the question we have in mind is that what kind of firms are being protected or helped by the local government, whether it's firms in the cities that are more exposed or more affected by the US tariff, or it's the firms in the industries that are more affected by the tariff. What we find is that both tariffs play a role, but the city level tariff have a larger effect. What implication we get from this? It tells us for the local government officials, they care about the city level total GDP. They don't only want to compensate firms that were affected by the trade war. They just want to make sure the city that they rule actually have a better GDP growth, have a employment stability, and have a social stability. That's why even for firms which are not in the sectors affected by the trade war, they also got extra protection, so they can pollute excess pollutants during the trade war. And how do the firm tend to generate excess pollution? What we find is that firms which have already installed SO2 scrubber, they are more likely to generate excess pollution. So scrubber is just a kind of a button which you can switch on and switch off easily. So at night you can switch off the filter so that the wasted gas can directly be emitted into the air. And also we look at the different ownership, and we find that for private firms, they are more responsive to the trade war, meaning that for state-owned enterprises, they are relatively more regulated regarding environmental protection, or could be the managers are more conservative in taking the action. And now let's come to the mechanism. And we try to show that the main mechanism to account for this effect is due to the lenient environmental policy. And here is the logic. For politically motivated government officials, when they face the trade-off between economic growth and the environment, they tend to sacrifice environmental protection by adopting lenient regulations which generate excess pollution. If this is the case, we should find that firms' pollution opportunity cost will be reduced. So what we do is to collect the fine rate data. So for each firm which violates the regulations, they will get a ticket and pay the fine. And we focus on the fines related to environmental regulations. And what we do is that we first plot the fine rate distribution. The left figure shows the cities more exposed to the trade war, and right figure shows the cities less exposed to the trade war. And the blue dashed line shows the fine rate distribution before the trade war, and the red line shows the post-trade war fine distribution. So we can see that for both cities, that they were facing a more strict environmental regulation, meaning that from the time trend, the Chinese government has imposed a stricter rule regarding environmental protection. However, there is a city level difference. For the cities that are more exposed to the US tariff, the strictness increase was rather limited. However, yes. No question. Okay. However, for the cities that are less exposed to the trade war, actually, the local government officials are more aggressive in terms of issuing tickets and give fines or punish the firms violating the rules. And the regression results tells us for the US tariff, it doesn't affect the numbers of tickets being generated, meaning that the US tariff won't affect governments on fining behavior. However, for each fine for each ticket, the amount of a fine being paid will greatly reduce, meaning that although if you are a firm, you violate the rule, the government is still gonna to generate ticket to punish you. However, the fine you pay will much smaller compared to before, meaning that it becomes cheaper to pollute. And because of this, the lower opportunity cost of polluting, firms tend to pollute more. And the second way to provide direct evidence regarding government regulation is to use the environmental stringency index. What we do is that based on local government's local annual report, we find the keywords related to environmental protection. And what we find is that for the cities that are more exposed to the US tariff, the local government will emphasize less about environmental protection and pollution in their next year's work plan. And third thing is about public attention. What we find is that actually the US tariff didn't increase the search index, meaning that the night pollution help firm to escape the public supervision. And also regarding media index, there is even a negative impact. This could be that since the government mentioned less about the pollution, the media also follow less. So that's about the firms are pretty much successful in terms of evading or catching the public attention. And fourth thing is about firms' bunching behavior. So for those firms that were monitored by the government, each firm were given a pollution upper limit. And what we can see that is that there is a bunching behavior, meaning that a firm just pollute just below the threshold. They don't dare to pollute that much before the trade war. However, after the trade war, we see that the bunching behavior becomes less, meaning that since the fine rate was very low, firm no need to adjust their production to meet the environmental requirement, but they directly just pollute and just pay for the fine. So we see a relatively fatter tail. And next thing is about the satellite monitor. And people are concerned whether the monitor data were manipulated by the government officials so that they are not that reliable. In order to test the potential data manipulation, we use satellite data. And we actually got similar results, which give us confidence that the monitor level data are reliable, meaning that they are not that severely being manipulated. So these are the direct evidence on lenient environmental policy. And now let's come to the driving force behind lenient environmental policy. That is, why do local government officials tend to adopt lenient environmental policy? One of the reasons is a political incentive because their future promotion is related to the current current economic development. So what we do is to interact the U.S. tariff with the place of the birth of origin. If these local government official, they were born in the local province, then they care more about the long run growth. So they care more about the environment, they care more about their reputation, and they don't care that much about the short run economic growth. And that's why for the natives, the US tariff has a weaker positive effect on pollution emission. And also for those party members who are about to retire, they also care less about the short run economic growth because the political incentive for these people are relatively weaker. And then it's about pollution externality. So for firms located along the boundaries of several provinces, the pollution that they generate will have a spillover effect to the neighboring province. So that's why the local government officials also tend to care less about those firms because of pollution externality. And because this pollution won't affect the local, these firms also tend to generate more, and this is consistent with the political incentive of the local government official. So I see a chat. Okay. Now I come to the conclusion. Yeah, I will finish right now. So what we find is that the US tariff surprisingly increased the pollution level in China, and the results are consistent using monitor level data or firm level end of pipe data. And meanwhile, China's export to the US indeed declined. And to explain the worsened air quality, we try to explain from the perspective of lenient environmental policy, and we provide direct and indirect evidence to support this hypothesis. And the underlying driving force behind the lenient environmental policy is a political incentive, that is the local government officials' future political career and promotion is related to the short-run economic performance and social stability. Yeah, so that's the main presentation. Thank you.